It's an exciting time for NFL Draft Nicks as the East-West Shrine game is ready to kick off this weekend, and the Reeses Senior Bowl kicks off next Tuesday. We're looking at some prospects from the latter game. Make a lot of sense for the Dolphins here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, the NFL draft lead for the 33rd team. And I want to give a thank you and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more this playoff season with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today on the show, it's Saturday. It's supposed to be a Friday show, but as you can see, I'm not my normal digs. I'm down in Dallas for the Shrine, and the Shrine practices kick off in about 2 hours. And we're going to be boots on the ground, checking out all the prospects at the event. But the Senior Bowl is the one that starts next week that we haven't done a preview yet on the program. So before we get into Shrine practice recaps with prospects that make sense, and we get into the news of the Dolphins hiring a wide receiver coach, which is going to come a little later today, instead, right now we're setting the table for the rest of these prospects because from this point onward for me, for your boy, we're going to be practice, airplane, next practice, home. It's going to be a busy 6 days, but it's an exciting time because you're digging into prospects across the board. And the exciting times as far as like the Senior Bowl perspective for the Dolphins really started yesterday because the executive director of the event, Jim Nagy, revealed that one of the Dolphins' assistant coaches, Coach Lem, who was formerly the offensive line coach under Brian Flores in the disaster year, and then he stayed on staff as an assistant offensive line coach, and he's been there ever since. He's going to be working hands-on with a number of offensive line prospects because he's serving as one of the offensive line coaches for the national team. So this is not an invitation to trauma dump about Coach Lem, right? Lemuel Jean-Pierre is the assistant offensive line coach and is the national offensive line coach for the Senior Bowl. It's never a bad thing to have more information to make educated decisions. It doesn't guarantee you're going to make the best decision. It doesn't guarantee you're going to make an educated decision. But a week of hands-on coaching with a number of prospects on this list that I look at and say, yeah, bring these dudes into the fray because they're going to alleviate a lot of the problems that you had with certain elements of your offensive line last year, depending on what you're looking for. So who are the offensive linemen on the national team? And this kind of segues well into segment 2, which is who some of my favorites are with each position group at the Senior Bowl for the Dolphins this year going into the event. And there's obviously a lot of ball game left for those narratives to change. But North Carolina State's Anthony Belton is listed at 6'5.5", 354 pounds, 34 5/8 inch arms. Monster man. Probably fringe top 100 pick right now. Has a lot of power. Road grader, as you would expect for a 354-pound cat. Josh Connerly Jr., Oregon Ducks, estimated at 6'4.5", 305. This was one of the players that when we did the mock draft roundup last Friday, yours truly gave to the Dolphins. I think he's tailor-made for what they want and aspire to be. And at some point, like what they've been versus what they aspire to be, you acknowledge there's a disconnect in the talent that was available at spots that prevented that vision from ever realistically being challenged. His teammate, Ajani Cornelius, who is a verified 6'4", 319 with 34 1/8 inch arms. He's also on the national offensive line. Ariante Ursary, another Mauler type, 6'6", 337, 34 1/8. And Minnesota actually ran some zone concepts. Now he's not super sexy in space or in vertical pass sets, but what he gives you from a movement skills and displacement skills in the run game is a player that really catches your eye and moves well, especially for being almost 340 pounds. Marcus Mbo from Purdue, estimated at 6'5", 305. This is a player that a lot of people really like. I like him better on the inside as compared to tackle, but the movement skills are off the charts type good. Right? You're a really, really good athlete. Wyatt Miler, 6'6" and a quarter, verified 318. The downside on that is there's 32-inch arms. And with a 32-inch arm length, you get into the conversation of, are you meeting NFL thresholds to play at tackle at the NFL level? For some teams, the answer might be yes. For other teams, the answer might be no. I like that he's 318. I think that's the big question with him as a guy that doesn't have great length and is a good mover. But, you go back to the Liam Eichenberg at Notre Dame conundrum, and it ended up, he was short arm tackle who played in an offense that was run heavy, and the quarterback can move around and get off the spot. So he looked better in pass protection than what he's since realized himself to be. I'm not saying Wyatt Miler is going to have the same NFL fate that Liam Eichenberg did, but I have some of the same questions. But him being almost 320, I think will probably help with some of that. And then on the interior of Jonah Monheim from USC, center, Jalen Rivers from University of Miami, 6'5", 337, 34 3/8-inch arms. Caleb Rogers from Texas Tech, 6'4" and 3/8, 303 verified. Ozzy Trapilo, supersized 6'8", 315-pound offensive tackle from Boston College, who's got 34-inch arms or 33 7/8-inch arms. Jalen Travis from Iowa State, 6'7", 315, 34.5-inch arms. And Gray Zabel, who's another favorite of mine from North Dakota State, 6'5", 305, 32.25-inch arms. Probably going to be an inside guy at the NFL level. This is a good group. You could tell me they could walk away with what I know about all of these guys right now before the Senior Bowl even happens. You could tell me they could walk away with Gray Zabel on day 2, Jalen Rivers in the middle rounds, Ozzy Trapilo in the middle rounds, Marcus Mbo on day 2, Wyatt Miler on day 2, Ariante Ursary probably in the second rounds where you get him, Josh Connerly in the first round, or Anthony Belton in the third round. And I'd feel really good about walking away with any one of those talents. So it's a lot of opportunities to get hands-on and see who you click with, who takes your coaching style the right way, who gets better throughout the course of the week and understands what you're trying to communicate. I'll be eager to see if they're going to be, or are they just going to be downhill? Are they going to be inside zone? Are they going to be outside zone as like the national offensive line and how they call the game? Like that'll be really interesting to me to see how they take that. And I'll be watching Coach Lamb too, evaluating him and how he coaches the guys. I'll get a chance to be up close and personal. So this is an opportunity that does not guarantee you anything. But what it does guarantee you is you will have, I lied, it does guarantee you something. You're going to have more hands-on, time-on-task information with these guys than any other team will have with any other prospect along the offensive line because of this opportunity. That's an outstanding opportunity to have, and what you do with it is not guaranteed, but I think it's an awesome development for the outlook of the Senior Bowl and the Dolphins and their hunt for upgrading their offensive line. We're going to get into some more offensive favorites. That's coming your way next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. If you're like me, you want to make the most of your opportunities here as football season winds down in the playoffs, and there's no better way to stay in on the action than with PrizePicks. PrizePicks, an opportunity for you to win money for your sports opinion. All you do is pick more or less on player stat projections to win up to 1,000 times your money with PrizePicks. You can use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. All you do is pick more or less on stat projections like rushing yards or passing touchdowns, and you can come up with combinations. You can make them as quick as 60 seconds on your phone, and you can get paid out instantly after your winnings. So it's not like you're sitting around waiting with millions of members and billions awarded in winnings. It's clear the people love PrizePicks, so download the PrizePicks app. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's the PrizePicks app. Promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. PrizePicks, run your game. So we are in this awkward window where some players have accepted invitations to both the Shrine and the Senior Bowl. And spoiler alert, these events happen within a few days of each other, effectively at the same time. You're also in this awkward standoff where players from Ohio State and Notre Dame played a football game like a week ago. And those guys may not be in position to partake in the game. So I will give you the full disclosure up front that there's some guys that are on the roster or on the list of accepted invites that may not end up being on the roster just because it's so close to a turnaround. So, for example, Dane Brugler yesterday broke that Will Howard, Xavier Watts, Donovan Jackson, Jack Sawyer, and Ty Hamilton, participants from both Ohio State and Notre Dame, will not be participating in the Senior Bowl this week because of how close their season ran up against the event. That's a bummer, and that's a big loss for the Senior Bowl. Now, Donovan Jackson, the offensive lineman from Ohio State, is a player whose tape at guard I didn't love, but then he moves to tackle, and once he gets past playing Abdul Carter in Penn State, he really settled in, and he was really good for the college football playoff playing at left tackle. He's got the tape to stand on for the games, and I think that's great. And I understand why all these guys kind of took a step back and say, hey, we got to reset, get ready for our pre-draft process with the combine. But that's a missed opportunity for Donovan Jackson, I think, to come in here and further push the issue with teams that, hey, I could be a tackle and a good tackle. So I'm bummed about that one. Obviously, Xavier Watts, with his ball skills as a high post safety, bummed that we won't get a chance to see him. And then Will Howard, I think, has a chance to put himself into the top 5 quarterbacks in this draft class with how he played in the college football playoff. Now, he'll have every opportunity to do interviews in the combine and a pro day and the whole 9 yards. So he'll be fine. But those are players from those two teams that I was really eager to get a chance to get eyes on. But if you do look at some of the other quarterbacks that are there, Jalen Milroe, Alabama, very different skill set than what the Dolphins obviously have at quarterback. But he's one that the price would have to be right on. But I think Jalen Milroe could, in theory, solve a number of issues that you have as far as be a long-term developmental type quarterback. I've met Jalen a couple of times. He's an outstanding person, outstanding work ethic, built well, 4.3 athlete, can do quarterback run game with him. Do you become one of those teams that has that kind of package where you've got a dynamic quarterback run game package and you use it on short yardage situations because your short yardage stuff's been broken for 3 years? Like, I don't know. But what I do know is that's a player that could provide some solutions and bring something different than what you don't have on the roster while being a developmental young quarterback. Is the price point that he's going to have to get drafted if you're going to want to acquire him going to make sense for Miami? That's to be determined. Probably not. The other quarterback, I know everybody wants to talk about Dillon Gabriel. People like Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart has better tools, I think. Dillon Gabriel's a little bit more of a high floor player, I think, but I don't think he has the strongest arm. I don't think he's as good of an athlete as maybe what he plays as. It plays as at the college level at times. Jackson Dart's a little bit more the prototypical passer, but he plays in an air raid spread offense with Lane Kiffin. And I think that this week at the Senior Bowl will be critical for Jackson Dart to kind of shed some of the perceptions about who he is as a passer. There is a Canadian college prospect that's coming down for the game, Taylor Elgersma. Don't know anything about him other than a couple of people that I've talked to down here in Dallas already have had a chance to watch him and really like him. I think he's like pretty interesting. So that's kind of the dark horse name. I'll be really interested to see how he does. Obviously, in this environment, it's a huge opportunity for him. Could kind of fall in line with like Tyler Bagent, who came from like the PSAC and came in like way big leap in competition, and see how he does in that regard. So those are the names at quarterback that interest me the most. As far as the running backs, I like Cam Scatterbo as a different kind of back than what the Dolphins have. I don't know that they would invest in this stratosphere. I think it'd be much more likely if they were going to go for a powerful player. It's maybe a Kyle Mullings from Michigan, a Damian Martinez from Miami. These are guys that you can get a little later in the draft than where Scatterbo is probably going to be a top 100 pick when it's all said and done. Central Florida has a player, RJ Harvey, who's pretty explosive and built low to the ground, as another interesting player who maybe has some of the speed element that Mike McDaniel might like. But that's, I think, one of the two ways. If you're going to move on from Raheem Mostert, and Jeff Wilson presumably is not going to re-sign because you've decided not to use him for 2 years running now, you're probably going to be in a position to add a third back and a late round guy, whether it's a Kyle Mullings or a Damian or Martinez. Like, Mullings not going to run well. He's a former linebacker who plays running back. Damian Martinez should run okay. Do you go that route, or do you go with a low to the ground, dense 200 plus pound back that's 5'9" and like an RJ Harvey out of Central Florida? So that's where my eyes will be at most with the running backs in this class. Wide receiver, want some size. Jalen Noel, Jaylen Higgins from Iowa State, Pat Bryant from Illinois. Elik Ayomanor is probably the guy for me as far as the play demeanor, the physicality, how hard he runs, how hard he blocks, the ball skills down the field. That's a player like 13's way too early. I don't know that he'll make it to you at 48. So how can you navigate? Can you move back? Like, can you get other assets that can put you in position to acquire him by making other moves with players that are on the roster? These would be the kinds of questions that I have. But I would shout out of all of the wide receivers here, Jack Betch from TCU, Savion Williams, also from TCU, is a hybrid type player that I'm sure they would love to get their hands on. Elik Ayomanor from Stanford, Jalen Noel and Jayden Higgins, both from Iowa State. And then I would also shout out Xavier Restrepo as he's not the big body, but he's probably one of the best 5 run blockers here at the Senior Bowl at wide receiver. And he's 200 pounds. Like, you put that up against what the Dolphins have had it at wide receiver, he'd be the biggest wide receiver on the roster most days, depending on how big his lunch is. If you look at tight ends in this class, Harold Fannin, my comp for him is Jonnu Smith. He's like a supercharged Jonnu Smith. He's a very productive player, had 100 catches this year for Bowling Green. Jason Taylor's son, Mason, will be here. He's a little bit more of a well-rounded inline player. I like Terrence Ferguson from Oregon. Gunnar Helm kind of blew me away with a leap and play that he took this year for Texas. He had almost 800 receiving yards, surprisingly good after the catch, and they asked a lot of him. And that Texas offense has a lot of mirrors to Miami as far as Steve Sarkisian and the concepts that they run. So Gunnar Helm is a tight end prospect that I think makes a lot of sense. Elijah Royo, I like as a player from Miami. I just, a field stretching player like that, I don't know how much that really moves the needle for you. You know, you've had field stretchers. You want your tight ends to bring a little bit more well-rounded skill set to the table, where I think at least Harold Fannin Jr. can do some of that stuff out by the numbers in the quick game underneath. And I think there's more growth potential for him than what there is with Arroyo, who's just this really silky, smooth, big-bodied route runner is what I think he is. And then Jackson Hawes from Georgia Tech is an inline player through and through, not really a good receiving profile, at least to this stage. Maybe he blows you out of the water in Mobile, but he will run you off the field. And anytime you get a tight end player like that, who just plays with that dog mentality and never touches the football and still plays super hard the entire time. Those are the kinds of guys that I think it's really easy to fall in love with. So those are the skill players that are standing out to me. We went through the offensive linemen that Coach Lem's going to get their hands on. We're going to get into some defensive favorites next here on this episode of Locked on Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Events are meant to be taken in person. That's part of the whole experience. So whether you're looking for your favorite sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more, get your tickets through Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. I love that they offer you a panoramic view from the seats before you hit purchase. You can toggle in all-in pricing, so there's no surprise fees when you put the tickets into your cart, and you can get your tickets delivered directly to your phone with just a few taps on your phone. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's download the Gametime app. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Gametime. What time is it? It's game time. Defensively, man, the trenches in this group are just loaded. Landon Jackson, Donovan Yaraku. Landon Jackson from Arkansas is 280-pound, probably 35-inch arms, base end. If you wanted to replace Emmanuel Ogbah with a player who plays like Emmanuel Ogbah, Landon Jackson would be that guy. I think he's a better pass rusher coming into the NFL than what Emmanuel Ogbah was when he came in at Oklahoma State. And he was obviously a top 35 pick, Emmanuel Ogbah. And Landon Jackson is like the young version when Emmanuel was first coming in. He's a player I think maybe not is going to be like a 15 sack a year kind of guy. He's got a lot of tools that make him easy to love. Donovan Yaraku from Boston College might have the best pass rush bag of any prospect in the country. Between him and Mike Green from Marshall, those two guys are big time speed, bend, pass rush counters. Neither one of them is the bigger guys. Mike Green's around 240 pounds. Yaraku's probably 245, 250. So you acknowledge it's very different than like a 280-pound Landon Jackson. Ty Robinson on the interior plays defensive tackle, kind of an unglorious style of player, but plays really hard, is really dense, is hard to move. He's a name that I like a lot as like a mid-late round guy, maybe fringe top 100, third, fourth round type of guy, who's just a lunch pail type of guy. And you could tell when you watch him play. Jared Ivey is probably like a odd front end, base end hybrid type player, 285, 290 pounds. But man, he's got some violent finishes. He was a guy who really caught me off guard when I watched this tape. TJ Sanders, defensive tackle. Omar Norman Lott, defensive tackle. These guys both had like 18, 20+% pass rush win rate as pass rushers on the interior. Alfred Collins, big nose tackle type. Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner, those guys from Texas A&M. Like this, you could go right down the list here. And there's probably, if you picked out every other name off the entire Senior Bowl roster for defensive linemen, I'd get excited for probably every other name. Like I'd be really juiced to put that guy on the roster. So if you're watching the practices, that's where you got to get your eyes, in my opinion, is with this group, because I do think you need, do you bring Bradley Chubb back? If the answer is no, you're going to need another pass rusher that's like a good option. If you do bring Bradley Chubb back, I think you probably need some competition for Quentin Bell and Muhammad Kamara. If you're going to need to probably bring in a new defensive tackle, if not two. So this group's going to have my attention in a big, big, big way. For linebackers, I really like a couple. I like Carson Schwartz from UCLA. I would lay down on the train tracks for this dude. He's a one-year starter. Unreal blend of natural instincts, burst, range, pass rush, or pass coverage, pass rush, He is a complete player. The only hole that you can poke in this guy's resume, as far as I'm concerned, is he's started like 10, 11 games as a college player, which is pretty crazy to think a guy that's instinctual as this only started that amount of games. But that's where we are. The other linebacker I really like is Demetrius Knight from South Carolina. There's other ones that I like out of this group, but Schlesinger is in a class of his own for me. And then Demetrius Knight transferred in from Charlotte for his final year at South Carolina. 245 pounds, long. It's been clocked at like 22 miles per hour on the gun. He's not the loosest guy because he's a big, tall linebacker, but the physicality that he brings, both of those two guys is guys that play off of blocks between the tackles. I think would pair really well with what you have in Jordan Brooks. I think it's safeties and the corners, and this is a busy group. There's a lot of names here. So I'm just going to read off some names that I like. I like Malachi Moore, probably a day 3 option. I like Sebastian Castro from Iowa as a day 3 option. At corner, I like Maxwell Hairston from Kentucky. We mentioned Xavier Watts is going to not be participating. Trey Amos from Ole Miss was at Louisiana and then transferred to Alabama and then transferred this year to Ole Miss. And he's just an absolute dog at the position. He's a very, very physical player with good straight line speed. I like Maxon Hook, a safety from Toledo, as a guy who is a little bit more like a low end or low safety that fits the run really well, tackles with confidence. Andrew Makuba, I think I'm going to be higher on the consensus. I was in the top 50 player in this class. Jonas Sanker from Virginia is a name that is probably going to start to get some more love as this process plays out. There's Lathan Ransom from Ohio State. Is like a big time, like heat-seeking missile as a tackler. So there's a lot of options at the Senior Bowl this year that I think make a lot of sense for the Miami Dolphins. And this is the kind of class that we need to infuse in certain spots up and down the roster to make it a more complete roster. We will have you covered for both events. So what's going down at the Shrine, which now practice starts in about an hour and a half. I got to get the heck out of here. So I'll be doing the practices. I'll let you guys know, fill you guys in on what's going on. That's coming your way later this weekend. And then obviously after the Shrine practices, I'll be flying to Mobile and we'll be in Mobile next week. So busy time. Dolphins making some moves. Pete Carroll gets hired by the Raiders. Sounds like Darrell Bevels might be one of the guys on the short list for the OC job there. Dolphins made a hire at wide receiver coach. We're going to get to all that stuff to you as well. So keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. That's it for me. I'm out of here. Go Fins.